Hello, friends. Alex Jones here. You all know I've worked for years with Steve Shank and eFoods Direct. I have eFoods for my own emergency food supply. You know, Steve, life is different now for all of us, isn't it?
Very different. People are using this great food to survive the present hurricane season, and we've already had $40 billion worth of damage from floods, storms, quakes, and droughts. And that's just the first 8 months of this year. Natural disasters are newsworthy, but only touch a few of us Americans. The huge issue of the Greatest Depression is on everyone's mind. The unemployment, the loss of homes, lost businesses, and skyrocketing food costs are hitting every American. So everyone needs food security.
Folks, this month you will get free shipping on every food order from eFoods Direct. That's right. Every order gets free shipping starting September 6th. Get stocked up with the best storable foods out there with eFoods Direct and be prepared for any emergency before it happens. To take advantage of this special, call 800-409-5633 or go to efoodsdirect.com/Alex. A very wealthy U.S. citizen is predicting that in 2011, we will witness the most important day in America in more than 50 years. He says it will change everything about our lives. The way you shop, travel, invest, educate your children, and even how you take care of your health and your own family. Now, this man has made some outrageous predictions over the years. The crazy part is, he's usually right. You see, he predicted the collapse of GM, Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, and America's biggest mall owner, General Growth Properties. In fact, Barron's called his work a dire prophecy. Recently, he created a video, which you can watch online for free, detailing his biggest and most important prediction yet. And it's a real eye-opener. I can't stress this enough. You should at least watch this free video online today. He explains everything you need to know, including simple steps you can take to protect yourself. You can find the video at www.endofamerica3.com. That's endofamerica, the number 3.com. Watch the free video at www.endofamerica3.com. That's endofamerica3.com. Alex Jones here with vital information concerning our nation's fragile food supply. Folks, there are some truly dangerous trends forming, and I think it's important for my listeners to do three things right away. Number one, study the past. History really does repeat itself. Number two, learn to spot the dangerous food shortage trends. Number three, take decisive action. A perfect storm is brewing for a global food crisis. That's why I'm telling everyone to read the new book, Rising Prices, Empty Shelves. Warning signs that trigger the deadliest famines in history. Don't get caught unprepared when the crisis hits. This book is only available at risingpricesemptyshelves.com. You'll also get a free copy of Supermarket Survival, How to Cut Your Grocery Bills in Half. Again, that website is risingpricesemptyshelves.com. That's risingpricesemptyshelves.com. All right, we are back live, and of course we'll be back tonight, 7 o'clock Central, 8 o'clock Eastern, 5 o'clock Pacific, 6 o'clock Mountain, with InfoWars Nightly News. We're going to be covering the imploding economy. We also have Dr. Sherry Tenpenny on the deadly Gardasil vaccine and the move to forcibly inoculate children in California without parental consent. That's all coming up 7 o'clock tonight. We're going to send out last night's hour-long special report on eugenics. The whole 9 yards. I think one of the best reports we've done the last 3 weeks of this show. Free to all InfoWars insiders who sign up for the free weekly newsletter, but I'm sitting on a special issue coming up this afternoon with the entire hour-long report, not just for PrisonPlanet.tv members, but for everybody. And please pass the email on to everyone you know. If you haven't signed up for the InfoWars Insider, there's a link up at the top of InfoWars.com. Here's some of the headlines right now as we go to the head of Euro-Pacific Capital, the CEO, who's predicted so much of what's now unfortunately unfolded. I know he's not glad all his predictions have come true, Peter Schiff, but just a lot of very important news taking place. Dow plunges 400 points after they announced further quantitative easing. Global markets tumble 4%. Zolik says the world is in danger. Their answer, give the euro completely over to the private bankers. Soros says U.S. already a double dip. How about a depression? Global meltdown, investors dumping everything. CNBC breaks that down. Also in other economic news, we've got some very important developments on that front that we're going to be breaking down with our guests here. Here's an amazing number. Study. Immigrants filled 81% of new jobs in Texas. Well, that's the thing, is that if you pay taxes and work in the system, then you can't afford to live. But the illegals pay very low taxes, and most of their wives stay home and get welfare. That's on record. And there's studies on that. And so the government subsidizes with taxpayer money, driving down the wages. This is not free market. This is a rigged crony situation. Incredible news on that front. You've got billions and billions spent on, quote, green jobs given to select insiders. You've got Obama with the lowest approval rating ever of a president this far into the presidency. The Democrats are talking about ditching him, but that won't matter. They'll just put in some new puppet. It'll take folks a while to figure out that the new puppet isn't going to save them. Same thing with Rick Perry on the Republican side of things, along with Mitt Romney, Obamacare lovers, Hillary care lovers, carbon tax lovers, former chief of staff for Al Gore in the case of Texas with Rick Perry. I mean, you can't make this up. It's only Ron Paul. We are deep into this. But going to Peter Schiff, the CEO of Euro-Pacific Capital, joining us via video connection from his headquarters. Wow, we are really seeing things plunge. What is happening in your analysis right now?
Yeah, you know, first of all, Alex, the bad news is all of my predictions have not come true. I think a lot more of them are going to, which means it's going to get a lot worse. You know, this phony economy is unraveling, which is actually a good thing. The problem is the government won't let it happen because we can't really have a restructuring and a legitimate recovery until we allow the phony economy that the Fed and Congress have created to unravel. But they won't let it happen. So I think we're going to get a lot more money printing and a lot more regulating and a lot more spending, which is going to prolong this depression.
Well, sure. I meant up until this point, you predicted the 08 situation. You predicted that it wouldn't help, and within 3 years it would start imploding even faster. So what I'm saying is up to this point, you've called the ball game up to halftime. So tell us, what's coming next? I mean, they're announcing new wars they want to have to try to get us out of this. They're announcing
wars are the last thing we need, you know, for a number of reasons. Forget about the humanitarian aspect of it. You know, the financial aspect is we don't have the resources to fight a war. We can barely afford peace, although we don't actually have that either right now. But the real crisis is going to come when the world is fleeing the dollar, not embracing it. Right now, as bad as it is, the dollar is actually going up. Treasuries are going up. People are buying dollars in treasuries as they sell stocks. When the real crisis happens, they're going to be selling dollars in treasuries. That's the real crisis. Because then the dollar plunges, then interest rates go up, and then prices go through the roof. And that is what's really going to turn this into a crisis, because it's going to be an inflationary depression.
Well, isn't this like a seesaw? Talking to Dr. Paul Craig Roberts, the father of Reaganomics, just about 3 months ago, he said, Alex, you could see a big sell-off of gold. It'll go up later even more as people run from the euro to the dollar. Then they'll run from the dollar to the euro. But overall, both the currencies in the long term or even medium term are going down. And I know you've talked about that there could be this run into treasuries for a time, but that's the sign that the circling of the toilet bowl is basically coming to its final conclusion.
Yeah, well, look, the Fed came out yesterday and didn't promise endless money printing. They just did this Operation Twist, which is actually going to backfire. The markets are going down, but I believe the Fed will eventually cave in. They will, you know, it's a game of chicken between the markets and the Fed, and the Fed is going to blink. The Fed is going to give the market what it craves. It's going to feed the addiction for cheap money, quantitative easing. It's coming, and when that happens, gold goes up and the dollar goes back down. But right now, maybe the market doesn't realize that that's coming, and you're getting a lot of liquidation. As people who believed that there was a recovery, there were a lot of people who managed money who actually believed that the U.S. economy was getting better. I knew that was just an illusion, but most people didn't. Well, now that reality is rearing its ugly head, that's causing a lot of the people who invest money to have to, you know, change their portfolios around to take into account this new information. And so you're getting a lot of unwinding of trades that were based on a recovery that just is not happening.
So what's going to unfold then? I mean, clearly they're not going to take Ron Paul's advice. They're not going to take your advice. They're not going to take Dr. Paul Craig Roberts' advice. They're not going to take Bob Chapman's advice or Gerald Celente's advice or John Williams' advice. They're not going to take Rubini's advice. They're not going to take Rogers.
Rubini's advice is the exact opposite of mine. Remember, Rubini wants more stimulus. He wants more government
spending. No, you're right. And he's also said we weren't really in a recession for a while, but now he's kind of jumping over to my view. But my point is they're going ahead with their current program of more stimulus. more QE3. What is that going to do?
It's just going to do more harm. It's going to just do more. This creates more inflation. You know, the key isn't to stimulate consumption or stimulate housing. The government's got it backwards. I mean, we stimulate. The reason we're in trouble is because we overstimulated those things in the first place. We need to reverse all that. We need the government to get out of the way so we can save and we can invest and we can produce and we can work our way back out of debt and repair the damage that bad monetary and fiscal policy has done to the economy. We're not going to repair the damage by breaking it more, but that's all they're doing. But I know they're going to continue with this because that's all they know. They are convinced that we need more spending, even though we're spending like crazy. They're convinced we need to go deeper into debt. Look, Bernanke thinks that the problem with the economy is that rates aren't low enough. I mean, they've never been this low. Well, how can we get them much lower? The fact of the matter is low rates are part of the problem. They're not part of the solution.
Well, Peter, what about the two-tier system? Sure. What about the two-tier system, though? The big banks, the institutions, they get it at 0 or less than 0, basically free money. For the general public, though, they're paying high interest rates. I mean, isn't that why the big mega private banks, Goldman Sachs, JP Morgan, and others, are very happy with what's happening? I mean, this is a command-control economy. Well,
they've been happy. They've gotten bailed out. And my feeling is if the Fed withholds the next round of QE, if we don't have QE3, we're going to have TARP 2. Because I think these major banks are about to fail again if the government doesn't rescue them. And the rescue is going to either have to take the form of QE or TARP. And, maybe the public, as much as they don't like the QE, they probably dislike TARP even more. So I think that the government's is going to go the route of the money printing rather than the bailouts. Although in order to bail them out, they need the Fed to print money. So if we get TARP, we end up getting both. But, I don't want Americans to have access to cheap credit to consume. And in a free market, they wouldn't. It's all the government subsidies that enable people to borrow money for consumption. I want people to save money and then buy things that they can afford. We need credit to go to businesses to make capital investments that can grow the economy and create jobs and that provide the means for paying off the debt. If you borrow money to invest, the investment returns will pay off your debt. If you borrow money to consume, you have no way of paying off the debt.
Peter Schiff joins us, the CEO of Euro Pacific Capital. Peter, there is a method to this madness in my view, but I want you to give us your take on it. Just like we saw in October and in the month before that, in September in 2008, when they wouldn't give them the TARP money, Paulson went into Congress and said there'll be blood in the streets, martial law, total collapse, and held people hostage. And when Congress wouldn't pass it, because they were getting 1,000-to-1 phone calls against it, as Barbara Boxer admitted, they went public and fear-mongered. Well, we've seen the heads of the IMF, the World Bank, the head of the European Central Bank, all come out yesterday and say, total collapse if you don't do QE3. And then Bernanke says, okay, I'll do QE3 with this twist scam.
Well, the twist ain't QE3 because remember, he's buying $400 billion of long-term, but he's selling $400 billion of short-term. So he's not actually expanding the balance sheet. He's just twisting it a little bit, but he's actually going to put the squeeze on the banks, which is going to backfire on Bernanke. Because see, remember what happens if we reduce interest rates so that people can refinance their mortgages and reduce their payments, that represents a loss to the banking sector because the banks own the mortgages and the banks are already in trouble. And if you take away their cash flow, they're going to be in bigger trouble. And so, this is not going to work.
Do you think Bernanke's really doing this to try to make the big banks loan?
I think he's doing it out of desperation. He wants to do something, and so this is what he's doing because he doesn't want to be seen as doing nothing. He's doing something. He's grasping for straws.
Okay, so if the big banks do start loaning all these trillions, Peter, won't that accelerate inflation?
If what?
If the big banks do start loaning all this money they've gorged on,
they are loaning the money. They're loaning it to the government. They're buying treasuries. They're buying. They're loaning it for home mortgages and student loans and all kinds of stuff. The money's just not sitting there. Unfortunately, if the government wasn't borrowing all this money, there'd be more money available for business. Sure.
Look. Put it in layman's terms. The point I'm trying to get at here is we saw fear mongering to get new monetary policy that the system wanted 3.5 years ago. Now we're seeing the same fear-mongering. Clearly, all the heads of the big central banks coming out and talking about gloom and doom and total collapse and greatest crisis. They know that's going to kill the stock market. So normally, even if things are bad, they'll lie.